How many of you have not eaten hazelnuts? Because we're going to shame you publicly. Okay, nobody raised their hands. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to give about 20 minutes of the hazelnut story to give you some sense of where we're at, where we started. I drew the short straw to give the talk. My partner in crime on this, Lois Braun. We've been at this for 20 years, and it was 2007. Don Weiss brought us together, everybody in the hazelnut world, to work on making hazelnuts a reality. And I guess all the professors and everybody else knew what they were doing, so they said no thanks. So all he got to work on the project was his grad student, who didn't have a choice, and an agriculture agent from Wisconsin. So here we are, 20 years later, we actually have a story to tell, and I think really excited about the future of where things are going with hazelnuts in the Midwest and beyond. I think it's important for this particular slide is, why hazelnuts, why new crops? There's 100 reasons to come at this. I come at it from, wow, look what we did with soybeans, look what we did with corn, look what we did with all these amazing crops. Why have we stopped there? Is inertia really that strong that we can't do more, right? And that, to me, it comes from a place of just pure wonderment about biology, about the natural world, and just thinking, why are we limiting ourselves, right, when we can do so much more? And for me, this is my backyard up in northern Wisconsin in Bayfield County. This is the Muckwa Pine Barrens on National Forest land. And if you look closely, sort of, it's nothing but American hazelnut and oak, right? So we have these biomes in the upper Midwest where hazelnut once was and still is, to some extent, a dominant shrub species. What's the global market of tree nuts is about $42 billion. What is the tree nut economy in Wisconsin and Minnesota in the last census year? Pretty much zero. Why? When right in our backyard is American hazelnut, and it's been there since the glaciers left, right? Okay, so that's my motivating factor is like, okay, we can do more and we have a crop ready to go. We just have to open our eyes and work on it. So American hazelnut, it is winter hardy, resistant to the dominant disease of American hazelnut, eastern filbert blight. But the nuts are very small, the shells are very thick, and that's one of the reasons it never really went commercial. On the other side of the coin is European hazelnut. If you've eaten a hazelnut, most likely you've eaten a European hazelnut, unless you're in the Midwest and maybe you've had hybrid hazelnut. European hazelnut is not endemic to the region. It's a Mediterranean species, grows great in Oregon, the Willamette Valley. Will survive to some extent here for a little while till the winter kills it or eastern filbert blight kills it. So European hazelnut is not an option. But it turns out the two, you can cross them really easily. And so the offspring from those crosses, the goal has been for a long time, primarily driven by private breeders or late career public breeders who don't have anywhere near enough time to see it to fruition. So most of those early efforts failed. You can combine the best of both worlds. You get the winter hardiness and disease resistance from American hazelnut, and you get the nut size and kernel quality from European hazelnut. And that's been the story of our last 20 years, is trying to develop improved varieties from these crosses. These blue dots, and it's okay if you want to admit that you're one of these blue dots, it's amazing how many people have tried growing hazelnuts in the past. Some admit it, some don't. And primarily all of those seedlings that they got came from private breeders, Phil Rudder and Mark Shepard. In 2010, shortly after our strategic plan was put together in 2007, 2008, we started doing some survey work. We found over 60,000 plants that were in the ground, all from seed, right? And so they thought they were growing hazelnuts, like I say, but in fact, they were just growing data for us in order to figure out, are there plants from these crosses that were made between American and European, are they good enough to support commercial production? So in 2007, we launched the formal collaboration between the University of Minnesota, University of Wisconsin, myself and Lois. We started with a staff of 0 and funding of 0 and have been able to grow it into a pretty robust program. I think at last count, we have about 20 different collaborators working on the project across the public and private sector. The Savanna Institute has joined us formally to really advance hazelnuts as a keystone crop in agroforestry. And so we're starting to really see some momentum, largely from this story. So we took the best plants that we could find from all those blue dots and evaluated them in replicate. And of course, this took 10 years, because everything with hazelnuts takes 10 years at a time. And we found these. So they're basically 25 years in the making, which is roughly the breeding cycle for developing new hazelnut cultivars. They've been formally released. The problem is you can't buy the plants, because we haven't figured out the propagation bottleneck yet. That's our primary limitation. But we've got kernel quality, we've got productivity, disease resistance, winter hardiness, all in a complete package. But great, pat on the back, right? Good job, team. But at the end of the day, when we're doing new crop development, plant breeding is not enough. In fact, I would argue it's irresponsible. It leads to boom and bust. If you just throw new crops, new promise, new opportunity out in the world, most likely things are going to go awry. Okay? We've seen this with how many crops over the years. If you don't have the full value chain in place, there's just no good way for the plant or the crop to be self-sustaining. Okay, so the plant breeding, that was the easy part. Now the hard part. We've got this big blue blob of the hazelnut community. So we've got breeders, growers, early adopters, charlatans, plenty of those, taxpayers, visionaries, nonprofits, like everybody's out there interested and wants to do hazelnuts. Our job is to try to turn that blob into an organized value chain, right? And on top of that, a value chain that is driven by the core principles of the folks that started it all. That this crop should solve environmental problems through agroforestry and other intentionally farmed systems, and that growers and communities come first. So that's been our guiding principle, our mission for developing this crop and this value chain as we go through. Okay, so if we didn't do this, you're not supposed to put red words on a PowerPoint slide, right? But this is to convey the sinister. You're supposed to feel a little bit scared about this. It's the free-for-all option of when you just breed something and you send it out and hope for the best, right? So here are the likely pitfalls for hazelnuts. You're going to have lots of seedling production, plants grown from seed, because it's way easier to grow hazelnuts from seed than it is to do vegetative propagation. And so if you're a nursery and you're trying to make money, that's where you want to go, because you can do it and you can sell plants today. It's a terrible idea for production because of the range or the variation, the limited yields, all of the disease and pest pressure issues, right? It's a component to the system, but it can't be just that. Two, lots of small, unprofitable growers. Hazelnuts aren't like blueberries, right? So you got to harvest the crop, then you got to dehusk it, then you got to shell it, and you start out with all of this, and it boils down to a little bit of kernel, right? So it takes a lot of infrastructure, a lot of processing capacity. Harvesting, it doesn't work to harvest by hand economically, so you have to harvest with fairly expensive equipment. So it's really hard to do this at a small scale, whereas you can with a fresh-eating berry crop, let's say. Often, early on, misaligned nursery production around demand and supply and pricing for that plant material. If you're a nursery trying to scale up your business of selling hazelnut plants, how do you know how many to sell when it takes you maybe 3 or 4 years to scale that up, right? Nursery and processing gatekeepers that are controlling pricing and market access, especially in a processing-heavy industry like hazelnuts. No coordinated supply chain and market development. So all these things, likely pitfalls if we didn't intervene and take some steps to try to shepherd the industry along. So what I'm going to do here in the last few slides is just give an update on the parts of this that we've been working on as a team, as a community. And the color coding is important. We've tried to reflect visually where the critical needs are. And by far, the biggest one is propagation. That's what's holding us back right now. Okay, so in 2007, with Don's leadership to address the germplasm bottleneck, no one ever completely solves the germplasm bottleneck, right? But we've got a good first start. We've got candidate germplasm to get out there for growers. We've got seedling populations. We've got a pipeline established. We feel like we're in a pretty good place there. In 2010, we started the work. 2014, we formally launched the American Hazelnut Company with leadership, University of Wisconsin, University of Minnesota. And this was to provide a path to market When you've only got, a couple hundred plants, or you've got, as an industry, 100 acres, you're not going to go knock on Cargill's door or General Mills' door and say, hey, you want to buy our hazelnuts, right? So you have to start small. And so at the time, we did not have a company that was buying hazelnuts. Plus, back to the motivating principles behind hazelnuts of growers come first, we built out a grower-owned company. And here's their product line. If you haven't tried it, highly recommend it. This is shameless promotion right now for their products and the company. So it gives us the path to market at a small scale. Where it goes from here, time will tell. So we put in place the market pull. We had the germplasm supply push. Now we had to deal with everything in the middle. And there's no hazelnut or nut production in the upper Midwest. So it's not like a grower could knock on a processor's plant and have them shell their hazelnuts. We didn't have that. So we had to build that too, which now I'm understanding why no one else offered to help Don with this project except me and Lois. So we built out a processing line in 2018. And then in 2022, we really started to think hard about, okay, how do we do this? Do we just sell hazelnuts to anybody that wants them? We're going to run into that pitfall. We've got many small growers all over the place, none of whom are profitable, none of whom are working together. So can we be more intentional about that? And so we've launched a Go First Farm project where we're building out farms in key geographical areas, and around those farms, sort of they're the sparks that light the fire, if you will. We have grower clusters built around those farms. And then 2023, to help shepherd the communication between the nurseries and the growers, we launched the Midwest Hazelnuts Company, which basically is pooling orders from growers and bringing them to negotiate production contracts with nurseries to, again, align that supply and demand, which is so crucial early on. All right, so I'll go into a little bit more detail on each of these. Just to reflect the germplasm development pipeline, it takes 20 plus years to develop a new cultivar, so you have to have a pipeline. You can't start over from scratch every time. And so we're on to phase 3 evaluation, which we have empowered and brought in a bunch of our Go First farms. One of the reasons they exist is to help evaluate this germplasm material, because again, you put the plant in the ground, you got to wait a decade before you really know if it's good or not. So we need all hands on deck on this program. Again, the bottleneck right now is propagation, and this is really an investable opportunity because we know we have demand for plant material and we don't have the plants. We just have to figure out the protocols to get the plants out to growers. We've tried every technique we can. University of Minnesota now is working on somatic cell embryogenesis. University of Wisconsin, we brought in a really skilled, high-powered tissue culture researcher and commercialized specialist that's working on tissue culture to get stock plants out to our partner nurseries to scale up the production through the more typical methods. Again, the Go First farms, the idea is to de-risk this production with growers that we try to convince them and talk them out of hazelnuts for days and days and days. And if they still say yes, we've found the right partner, right? So they know what they're getting into, and to do this initial yield evaluation at scale, and then to work with us to help build out a grower cluster around that key Go First farm. These are some examples. We're still early stage. Our oldest one is at the Savanna Institute at their pilot farm. They're doing an alley cropping system that from looking at it is working really well. It's really fun to see this being done at scale, like real life agroforestry in the Midwest. And I think the number of people that go through that farm now to learn about it, it's a testament to the great work that Savanna Institute has done with that facility. It's really fun to see it. We're now up to 10 Go First farms. And note all the yellow dots in Wisconsin, the yellow stars, those are the Go First farms. There are 2 in Minnesota, but you guys are working on it. Okay, you're getting there. The goal is to have 10 in each state and continue to move out from there. And we're trying to be intentional where these are located. Again, the right farm partner, the right geography, and the right time. And really, it's not so much a lack of interest to do this, it's a lack of plant material. We're already sticking our necks out too far making promises to all these yellow stars, but there's just so much interest. Okay, so the strategic plant sales to scale the industry, the way we're doing this is all of the plants, all of the cultivars that we've produced are only available through Midwest Hazelnuts LLC. And we've put together a priority plan on how those plants are moved out to growers at this stage when the plants are in limited supply, basically to maximize the value of those plants when they come out of the nurseries. So first is to fully populate the Go First farms. Second is we have early adopter commercial partners. RAA is here today, Rahi and Diane. Diane's going to be on our panel. They're one of our early adopter commercial partners that are helping to take the plant material and get it out to their grower networks, right? So that's our second priority. Again, so they can do the hard work of cultivating grower relationships, peer learning, processing, aggregation, all the things that you have to do to build out viable supply chains and market relationships. Then it goes out to Go First growers. Those are growers that are in a close geography or proximity to the Go First farms. And then from there, individuals, if we still have plants, have access to it. Okay, so this is our processing line. This is where I spend my winters for the most part. And it's classic chicken or egg story, right? So there's not enough production of hazelnuts to warrant someone to make the investment in the expensive equipment and facility. There's just not enough flow through of material. But if you don't have a processing facility, nobody can get to market, to develop the market, to build the demand, to build the processing plant, right? Classic chicken or egg. Great opportunity for the public sector, great opportunity for slow money to invest in a project like this. And that's what we've been able to pull together, a multi-partner approach to this. We finally have got it to a scale that is right-sized. You know, it's not too big, but it's fast enough that we can get growers to market with a price-competitive product. But like any partnership, it's dependent on all the partners. And Northland College, as of May 31, will be closing its doors permanently. That's the site for our processing facility. And it's been like the key component of this because we've had a sweetheart deal on the space. Also, I live up there, so I can subsidize the processing as a public employee. So with Northland closing, we don't know where this is going to go. So we're reaching out to our other partners to figure out where it goes. But without this facility, we're kind of sunk, right? We really, because the private sector is not going to step up to this, to do it yet, because there's no money in it yet. So it's definitely an opportunity if we're trying to move the hazelnut needle is to address this challenge right now. Okay, so then the other part, the American Hazelnut Company. Pam, Emma, are you still here? Yeah. You know, hats off to these two and all founders of startup companies that are doing the hard work of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just incredible the hours and passion and energy that it takes to develop these product lines. This slide to me is really pretty interesting, and actually these go together, right? Because it really is a question of this scaling and how you do it. And I think hazelnuts are an example of sort of starting at a really small scale. But we've sort of think about, well, at some point with the genetics and if you know the Go First farms get through that first initial risk hurdle, people are going to pay attention. And it's not out of the question. A couple farmers get together, put in 1,000 acres, they line up their market and they build their own processing plant. It's not that hard to do, right? We could get to a scale where Ferrero's going to come, Ferrero, maker of Nutella, right? They'll come knocking at our door and buy all the hazelnuts that we can grow, no problem. But does that fit the goals of the grower community that was laid out at the beginning of this project? And so, I mean, if we're going to build everything from scratch and think that we can do that, we might as well just do it all, right? So can this be a Ferrero scale product? Why not? Can we build a hazelnut company in the Midwest that the growers own that is, you know, benefiting the Midwest entirely rather than just selling as a commodity? We can do those dreams right now because it's relatively easy, but that's the dream. But that ultimately, I think at the end of the day is our goal, and it's one of these decisions that we have to make. It's also a question, I think, as we talk about CLC crops. When they start out really small, like American Hazelnut Company, bless their hearts, but they're so small that sometimes they're easy to dismiss. Like, well, that's not real agriculture. That's just a niche little product. But we're at this point when we're talking about rebuilding farm systems or agricultural systems where we really are back starting at square one and building companies, building production systems, right? So that's an approach that we're taking rather than just expecting that with the snap of a fingers, even though maybe we could go to 30,000 acres of hazelnuts in 3 years or something, right? So it's that scale question that we're always wrestling with. Okay, so I'll just end on this inertia question, right? So the flywheel was mentioned, and in agriculture, this thing is incredibly powerful, right? Inertia in production, inertia in R&D programs, inertia in risk management, inertia in policy, inertia in consumers. All of that is leading us to the status quo. And I don't criticize it, it's reality, right? If you're gonna plant in the spring, you've got bills to pay, you've got debts, you've got, like, it's just the way the world works. So how do you start to move some resources away from that into new crop development, right? It takes a force of nature like Don Weiss and Nick to be able to pull and build out a program like this that starts to move resources into new crop development. And that's the question I'll just leave with us. How do we free our researchers, NGOs, and early adopters from the constant grind of securing resources from the inertia, a system that is not built to fund new crop development? It is built to support the crops that exist for good reason, right? But we're relying on that system to fund new crop development. And what it leads is to burnout. You know, I will tell you, 20 years of this, I'm tired. I'm tired of the constant grind of fundraising and reporting and outreach education, all the stuff you have to do to get those, you know, $10,000 loans or $10,000 grants, $50,000 grants. If we don't fix that problem, this is gonna go too slow. We have to find a different funding model than just trying to scratch out some leftovers from the dominant system, right? I mean, that's the reality we face. That's why Forever Green has taken so long that it has, because we're trying to fund it in a way that isn't designed to fund it. Okay, with that, let's move into our panel. Diane. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Diane Christofore, and I'm the Executive Director of Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, and we're a nonprofit based in Northfield, Minnesota. You may know us as the Tree Range Chicken People, but you've been hearing about ecosystems. And so we're an ecosystem management organization that believes the multifaceted affinity groups and stakeholders need to be at the table to take back the ownership and governance and control of our food system. And we picked chicken as the entry point, and you'll hear from our founder, Ray He, too. I know he's up next. So happy to be here with y'all today.
Hi, everyone. I thought I'd move to get out of the way there. José Franco, I'm the Director of Research for the Savanna Institute. Been in this position for the last about 7 months now. And I'll be talking a little bit more about what the Savanna Institute is doing in terms of hazelnut research and how that applies sort of to our agroforestry portfolio overall.
Okay. It looks like I did my job. Propagation and processing continue to be the primary bottlenecks for sure. So Diane and Jose, do you guys want to react to what you're seeing or anything in the presentation? And we'll go from there. If you've got questions, go ahead and type them in. And
yeah, I guess the first thought as I was listening to you, Jason, was like, I'll preface this by saying I worked on Kernza, then I worked on Winter Camelina, and I'm up here talking about hazelnuts now. So, you know, in visiting, you know, with our Scott Brainerd is our hazelnut tree crop breeder, hazelnut and chestnut. Like this aligns with exactly what I'm hearing from our research staff as well in terms of just some of the bottlenecks of propagation and having genetic material out available at nurseries or elsewhere. There are some other things that I'll speak to as well, like the agronomics and other things, but this doesn't surprise me, Jason. I guess this aligns with everything that I'm hearing as well.
And I'll speak from the model that we're working to deploy. Hazelnuts are a huge part of the equation. They're a native species, and they actually serve as the understory of where the chickens range underneath. And so the establishment of those perennial plants takes about 5 to 7 years. And so as we think about working with farmers to have access to establishing the farms, it's been really important for us to think about that value chain development. We also have gone ahead as we've been training farmers on regenerative poultry and raising them in their natural habitat, which is under these perennial trees. We knew that it didn't make much sense to keep training farmers on this new way of farming without control of the processing facility. So we went ahead back in 2021 as a nonprofit and raised grant funds to actually to bring in a processing facility in Stacyville, Iowa. So I think for us, as we look at this and the access to processing, every year we go up to Ashland and work with the farmers to make sure that their hazelnuts are processed, but the mapping and the logistics behind value chain coordination is so critical as we continue to think about scaling these enterprises and encouraging farmers to think about either transitioning or starting in this way of farming. And so I really commend Builders Initiative on the work that they did on mapping out what currently exists in the blue stars and yellow stars you saw. We got to be like hazelnuts, which grow in clusters. And so we really need to be thinking through these beginning Go First farms and thinking about farmer-led initiatives and farmer training, and then also farmer ownership too of those products as we're scaling them.
Yeah, and I guess I can add, you know, a couple of things that we're doing at Savanna Institute, aside from, of course, the breeding, which is hopefully working with, of course, our university partners to help address some of the propagation issues and try to expedite. You know, Jason spoke to the sort of 10-plus year timeline of cultivar development for hazelnuts, which obviously is a very long time and is a challenge. You know, one thing we're doing is trying to sort of look at ways to speed up that process and accelerate the breeding process or selection process to get those to the people that need those cultivars. The other thing that I think kind of relates to the processing side is, you know, one thing we're doing at Savanna Institute is working with American Hazelnut Company, I think called Hazel Heart Farms now, if I'm not mistaken, right? To really kind of build the next phase of growth and sustainability, like really take it to the next level, and I think that'll help maybe tap into some of the processing issues as well. So. Yeah,
with that 10-year time frame too, the sequencing of these different financial services and thinking about where can we leverage public funding for what's needed for the quality assurance and quality control to be able to bring these products to market is huge. And we worked with Hazel Heart Farms and Jason Fischbach to secure one of the continuous living cover grants. And we actually developed a brand new machine for hazelnut dehusking. And so that sort of innovation, I mean, it was not a small bill. It was about $45,000 after it was all said and done. But now we have a prototype that we can actually take in the data and evaluate, and so that we can, in the next prototype model, be able to share all those learnings for these clusters of farmers that are the early adopters in the work.
Great. One of the questions that came in, Diane, is for you. What does RAA plan to do with all of the nuts that are coming from the growers? Are you helping them market? Do you have a brand? How is that going forward?
So right now, the aggregation that is being overseen by the ecosystem specifically for chicken, because we're at that critical volume, about 50,000 broilers. But right now, the hazelnuts on these first 11 farms are starting to get to a point where they're going to be maturing. The largest farm in the ecosystem, working with Poultry is Organic Compound, if you've heard of them. And we do hazelnut parties down there, but they're direct marketing through their food truck actually right now to customers. But as we continue to get to that scale, it's certainly something that we're thinking about, the aggregation, the branding, and the marketing from an ecosystem perspective. It's the next racehorse, if you will.
So another question was, what is to stop the Midwest hazelnut industry from turning into the Oregon industry, sustainability-wise? So we definitely are envisioning a very different production system in the upper Midwest, and leading both RAA with the poultry system and Savanna with agroforestry is definitely re-envisioning the way we grow hazelnuts in the U.S., and we're actually seeing the Oregon industry start to pay attention, believe it or not, which is exciting to address some of their sustainability issues. So, Jose, do you want to talk some about agroforestry or the systems that you guys are envisioning with where hazelnuts fits into your system?
Yeah, I guess just tying that in with the sustainability angle. So like hazelnut is one of the many crops that we're working with at the Savanna Institute. And one of the goals here is to obviously develop systems around these crops, develop the crops in terms of the tree crop breeding and the agronomic best management practices that are severely lacking for these crops. And kind of configure them, like optimize what the configuration of what those agroforestry systems should look like, right, on the landscape. And that includes placement, that includes tree crop suitability, which some of our scientists have worked on. That includes, developing everything from like alley cropping systems where we're integrating some of these tree crops, woody perennials, into annual row crop production systems and looking like at the ecosystem services of that whole system, right? Of the addition of the tree and what is the tree doing in terms as a carbon sink, which one of our scientists is actually measuring on hazelnuts and chestnuts, but also what is the system doing in terms of soil erosion, soil loss, wind, water quality, and these other metrics that we're interested in. So we're trying to look at it from the sort of a holistic viewpoint, and which of course aligns a lot with RA is working on as well. So.
Okay. The last question that was the question about markets and sales, and I'll take a stab at that one. So, we've been really intentional about trying to align supply and demand, and right now, the American Hazelnut Company is gobbling up all the hazelnuts that can be produced and needs more. I think RA is finding the same situation, is that at the scale we're at now, there's no problem with markets. We've had conversations with smaller and larger food companies that tell us, yes, we want hazelnuts. The challenge we have is, the feasibility study regarding 1 million acres of winter camelina, relatively easy to do because you know what your yields are going to be in 1 year, and you can think about production contracts and offtake agreements and all that stuff. But when we're talking a food company, and say, yeah, we'll have hazelnuts for you in 5 or 6 years. It's way harder to have those conversations. It's way harder to think about production contracts. Who's going to take the risk on a 5-year wait, right? So it's a much more challenging thing, I think, to sort of project out what the market is for hazelnuts. We can do TAM studies about nut production, snack foods. All of the things are tailwinds that, yes, more nuts. But to really quantify those markets, we have to have product in hand to do that, or at least 1 or 2 years out instead of 5 or 10 years out.
Yeah, I would just add to the portfolio approach that Forever Green's taking, and the way that we're thinking about that within our system, with multiple different products coming off 1.5 acres of land, is so important, both on the farm level and on a regional organizing level. And so as we think about investing in infrastructure, depending on where the UHMDI processing is going to go, or let's think about other products that are coming off of these farms and these perennial systems. Let's pool our resources and our connections, and that's why rooms like this are so important, to have stakeholders across the different industry sectors to come together around this.
Great, thank you. Well, go ahead.
I'll just echo that. One key thing that I'm taking from this is the collaborative aspect is so important to this, right? And building relationships, as was mentioned earlier. And I think this is a great platform to do that. So.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose and Diane, for participating.